Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Business of Learning podcast. My guest here today is Peter Dublin, who is the president of the Family Learning Company. Peter, I'm excited to have you here.
Likewise.
I want to start off by obviously asking you to tell everyone a little bit more about what you do and who you guys are, because I think it's such an interesting dynamic when it comes to education and learning. So, tell everyone a little bit more about that.
Well, I started my career as a teacher. I taught for 5 years. And then I started this company in 1976. We started developing textbooks. And in 1980, we started developing software. And shortly thereafter, we stopped developing textbooks because software is more fun. The way I saw it at the time, I think it's probably still true. Everybody, all publishers, we worked for publishers, and publishers knew exactly what a good textbook was and they didn't want it. But they didn't have a clue about software. So if we created good software, they didn't mind. And so I felt we had we were an author-oriented developer and had a lot more flexibility in software than we did in print. So our first software product was 1980, and it was called Bank Street Writer, and it was a word processor for kids. And it was so easy that a million adults bought it too. And since then, that has still been our best product up until now, up until the things we're doing now.
And how has the company developed so far now to where you guys are doing a very, I would say, uncommon take when it comes to education and learning, as opposed to the general, hey, get a student and the student is learning a specific area.
The change really came with my fifth business partner. We started conversations in 2018, and we had both been at what we were doing for a long time. And we both felt, I think appropriately, that we were very successful at what we did. Both felt that we didn't have the impact we had hoped for when we started. And we came to the conclusion that it was our focus on individuals. And we decided we would change our focus, both personally and corporately, from individual learners to families. And that was the big change. And what happened at the same time is we changed our business focus from being a developer working for publishers to becoming a publisher ourselves, because that was the only way we could create family learning software, is if we did it ourselves. So that was we pivoted over the 48 years lots of times, but never as severely as we did in 2019. We changed the name of the company. We're on our fifth name. We started as Intentional Educations, then became Vision Tech Learning, then Maestro Learning, then Flink Learning, and finally Family Learning Company. Finally getting named that reflected exactly what we did.
Yeah, and how have you found over these decades? How have you found to pinpoint how easy, or when would you know the right moment to pinpoint when is the right time to pivot? Because there's been a few pivots that you've done along the way.
There's never a right time. Short of you find out that the business doesn't work and you still want to do something. To me, pivoting is more personal. In 1983, we had 45 full-time employees, 20 contractors. We were in an old school building. I was walking down the hall with one of the people I worked with. Someone walked by and said hello, and I figured it was a contractor. I turned to this person, and it wasn't. It was a full-time employee. And I realized I didn't like that company anymore. Too big. So we didn't drop the magazine we were publishing and drop the textbooks and drop from 45 to 10 people because the market told us to. I told us to, because I didn't feel comfortable running a company that was so, by my standards, I mean, for other people, 45 people is nothing. But it was so big that I didn't know everybody, and I didn't like it. So a lot of we changed to family learning, not because the market told us to.
Sure.
I mean, this family learning software is a new category. The market can't tell you to create a new category. So it for me, it's always come more from personal need and growth and personal change than from the market telling me anything.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And how does that compare to where you're at now with the business? And obviously, we had a brief chat before this where you mentioned something, a good opportunity coming in. How does that?
Well, actually, having just said that, we're now in the process of pivoting slightly because of something the market has told us. So most of my business life, I've made decisions out of my own personal biography. But we've now come to the conclusion that schools don't really like our product. And we think they should. Think is pretty much irrelevant.
Yeah.
I mean, we have a product that I guess is fundamentally critical of the school because it's solving the literacy problem that they've created. And they verbally acknowledge the problem. I mean, test scores just came out again. They're awful. 65% of kids are not proficient readers and are reading below grade. And it's been that way for the last 20, 30 years. And yet the schools, when we offer them an alternative, just keep buying the same stuff and doing the same things. So at some point, the market tells you whether the market's right or wrong. The market tells you, we don't like you. We don't like what you're doing. And so that's, now that we're a publisher, I guess, when we were a developer, I could kind of do what I wanted. But now that we're a publisher, we actually have to be more sensitive to the market.
And how does that conflict with some of, or how is that compared to in the past when you didn't really want to be in a company that could be large by your standards, and now you have an opportunity where the company could start growing, maybe back up to where it was before? How do you compute that in your head, and how are you thinking about it?
Oh, I've got a partner that has successfully run ed tech companies, helped them grow. He was president at Lexi Learning Systems, which is still one of the, I think, the best school-based literacy software company. And he helped them grow from 25 to 5,000 customers. So now I don't have to worry about the company getting too big for me because it won't be too big for him. And over the 50 years, there's been a fundamental change from brick and mortar companies to remote companies. So I don't like it, but we all and have been for the last 15 years. So getting big doesn't have I won't be walking down the hall bumping into people I don't know. So it's that kind of combination. But the main thing is that I have a partner who knows how to run businesses, just know how to grow businesses, isn't afraid of businesses getting bigger the way, it's not afraid, it's not comfortable the way I was uncomfortable.
Yeah, perfect. And for the listener right now, obviously family learning is likely something that they are just hearing about now, as it was for me. So tell them a little bit more about kind of the structure that you guys have going on. Obviously, you said that you were trying to do it into schools, and then that B2B side of things wasn't really working. So explain a little bit more on the B2B versus B2C and kind of how that happens and how the product, I guess, arrives to a family.
Well, let me just take a minute and define the category.
Sure.
Because it's a category that sounds like you know it. Because it's got 2 words in it, 3 words in it, all of which you know. Family learning software. But it doesn't exist. We're it. Consumer products are not family learning products. They're just consumer products that are used, it's learning products that are used in the home. That's not to us what family learning is. Family learning is multi-generational content and multi-generational process. So our product has literacy activities designed explicitly for preschool kids, elementary school kids, upper elementary school kids, middle school kids, high school, I guess they're youths by that point, and adults, all in the same product. And there's no other product like that. But it's also multi-generational process because we support and encourage family members to learn together. Not for parents to teach kids, but for them to learn together. Because the likelihood is if the kid's challenged in reading, so is the parent. And if the parent is functionally illiterate, the kid is probably having reading challenges. Literacy or functional literacy is fundamentally a family problem. What we want to do is we want to get the product to the family. And the family owns it. So if a school purchases the product, they don't own it. Once the family registers, the family owns it. The family moves to another town, they still own the software. It's their software. We want it to be used in the family, and we want it to be owned by the family.
I understand. So I just want for clarity then, it goes through the school because the school is kind of like the mediator, but it's not the school is.
Yeah, we don't sell directly to consumers, but we can sell B to G to C. Business, which is us, most of the time. Government agencies who don't use it themselves directly. That's why it's B to C, but it then goes to the consumers.
Of course.
So that's what a school is. But we also could go B to C to C, or B to B to C, business to business. A corporation could buy it, but again, it's not accounting software. They're not using it. So it goes to their employees.
For sure.
And we also have B to O to C, family serving organizations, after school programs, boys and girls clubs. So we could sell to them, but again, they're not using it for their own internal purposes. So, it's B to a lot of things to C. Starts with us, but always ends up with the family, however it gets there. And I use the word own, and I used it with precision. We don't have subscriptions. We have a one-time license. We consider it morally unconscionable to get people started on a literacy journey, which will take years, and require them to stop because they run out of money. So they get a perpetual license. Once they have access to it, they have access to it forever.
I see.
And not just one student, but 6 family members, each with their own account, each with their own record-keeping data. So the program keeps track of how they're doing, whether it's individually or whether they work with someone else. If they log in together, because we allow multiple people to log in at the same time, they all get credit for what they do together.
Awesome. That gives me a lot of clarity. Thank you. And I want to touch back on the partnership that you brought up. How, after having many, many partners, how have you now found the right partnership? What was that process of finding a partner, and what are some of the things that you look for in a partner to hopefully now be certain that they are the right fit for the relationship that you want?
Well, you got to understand, it's basically a crapshoot. We usually think of partners, domestic partners. See, in my personal life, I'm very boring. I only have one. But 50% of domestic partnerships, more than 50%, dissolve. Well, it's not because people are, ill will or whatever. It's just, it's when you start a partnership, you don't really know enough to know whether or not it's going to last. So part of it is that. Part of it is that I had a bunch of partners previously that didn't work out. So our self-interests weren't always aligned. And that's sometimes hard to understand. I mean, I look at you, I don't know you that well. I don't know how aligned our interests are going to be. So that was part of it, enough scar tissue. Part part of it's luck.
Mm-hmm.
Part of it is I'm older. When I started this relationship, I had a better sense of what I wanted. We also talked a lot about what we each wanted.
Hmm.
And what was driving us was impact.
Hmm.
And so having that consistent desire, um, that made a big difference.
Hmm.
We were equally smart, but in very different ways. And that I didn't fully appreciate when we started.
I
But the
see.
ways was nowhere near as important as we could hold our own with each other.
Hmm.
And so we learned, in a sense, to accommodate to some of the differences because
Sure.
there was a fundamental strength in the relationship, both intellectually and in terms of
Mhm.
what we wanted out of the business.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And I don't have as many years of experience as you do, but from everything that I've learned so far, it's so interesting to me when people get into partnerships and they're usually, again, equally smart, but they're good at the same things. So it's like there's always going to be like, okay, if we're good at the same things, then who takes over the thing that we're good at?
Yeah,
So I found it
here's the
so
irony
interesting.
for us. I picked him in large part because he was an MBA. He
Mhm.
wasn't a trained educator.
Yeah.
What I didn't understand was he was one of those rare Harvard MBAs who thought that it was actually useful to understand the business he run.
Hmm.
So when he was at Lexia, he became a literacy expert.
Hmm.
He never taught, wasn't trained as an educator, but he basically trained himself in the substance of that business. And so it turned out, much to my surprise, not to his, he knew it, but to
Hmm.
my surprise, he's actually a good product designer and he knows a lot about literacy, which is the context in which we do family learning. He knows
Yeah.
a lot more than I do
Hmm.
about that, even though I've got a doctorate in education and he's got an MBA. And
Yeah.
so it turned out that we did in fact overlap, but that was helpful
Hmm.
for certain things we could do together
Yeah.
that we wouldn't have done if he hadn't trained himself.
Yeah. And that's so interesting because there is the overlap, but the skill set to that overlap is still different, which is they both uplift each other, which is pretty awesome. And I have a couple more questions for you here, and one of them is one that I always like to ask people who are on the younger side here, which is with all the experience that you've had so far in your entire entrepreneur career, what's one, two, maybe three things that you wish you knew before you started? Like with
Oh,
all,
no, I'd
yeah, go ahead.
take a completely different attitude. If I had known more when I started, I wouldn't have started.
Hmm.
Not knowing what I mean, I taught at a graduate program for teachers,
Okay.
and I taught a curriculum course, and a group of my students and I gathered and essentially started the company. Writing proposals to publishers, and we got a contract, and we had proposed to write a book, and the publisher said, "I want you to write it and physically produce it."
Hmm.
And if I had known anything, I would have said no. Uh, After 3 years, we had enough money that we could invest in something. And I invested in a magazine for teachers, a computer magazine for teachers. I never would have done it if I had known anything about magazine publishing. So for me, I think I've, I've, I've leveraged my ignorance. And so when I look back, I'm glad I didn't know anything because nothing fear. I wasn't afraid of anything. I figured
Hmm.
I could do anything because I didn't know better. And that's, not true of everybody. Now, on the other hand, once we started, I made it my business to know everything. So I set type for our textbooks. I,
Hmm.
I you know, I did, I did photo research. I did, before I handed off a task to somebody else, the only thing I've never done is program. It's ironic given that
Yeah.
that's what we do. Um, and so I wanted to understand all the pieces before I handed them on. But ignorance was really my friend.
Hmm. I really like how you said I leveraged my ignorance, and it goes back to I don't remember exactly who I heard say this, but they said if you have nothing to lose, you have nothing to fear.
Yeah.
So that perception allowed you to just push through and just go at it, even without the knowledge or whatever else, the skill set, whatever it might have been. So that's so interesting. I leveraged my ignorance. I noted that one down. And my final question here for you, Peter, is actually not a question for me. It's a question from our last guest, and they had no idea who you were, but they have a question here for you. Are you ready for it?
We'll find out if I'm
All
ready.
right, perfect. What is the message you want to share with the world?
Everybody can learn to read. And if you can't read, it's not your fault. In all likelihood, uh, there are people who are paid to help you learn to read. And if you can't read, it's more than likely their fault. So look for another way to do it. If what's worked in the past hasn't worked for you, it's not necessarily your fault. Now, it might be your fault. And there are some people who are adamant that they're not going to learn anything. But for the most part, it's not your fault. And it's the fault of the people and the methods uh, that are in your past. And to me, that's why we're creating family learning software, to provide an alternative method uh, for the methods that have demonstrated they don't succeed.
Hmm. Very, very
It
powerful,
was
Peter.
when we first started doing software, I had the same attitude. This 1980 said, if you don't understand the software is poorly written. It's not
Hmm.
your fault. It's their fault. And so I think I've pretty much taken that, from that time all the way to the present. Most people, if they can't read, they think it's their fault. I mean, schools blame families
Hmm.
for the kids not being able to read. Who's getting paid here?
Yeah.
It ain't the parents.
Yeah. That's for sure, Peter. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you. Thank you for sharing all those insights. I think this is such an interesting topic. It's such a topic a topic that's often overlooked. So I think it's really awesome to have you here and share all those things. Where should people go if they want to learn a little bit more about what you guys have going on at Family Learning?
FamilyLearningCompany.com.
Awesome. I'll leave everything here down below in the description. Peter, thank you so much for your time.
Okay, thank you.